The last shift. Thora Wilder pushed through the heavy glass door of Ember and Brew, just as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floor. The cafe smelled like fresh espresso and cinnamon, the familiar scent that had become synonymous with comfort for half the college students in the neighborhood. She untied her worn canvas jacket, revealing the simple black t-shirt and jeans underneath, and made her way toward the back room where the staff lockers were kept. "Late again," called out Marcus from behind the counter, his tone light but pointed. He was wiping down the espresso machine, his movements practiced and efficient. "That's the third time this week, Thora. Chelsea's going to have your head." Thora felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the sensation that had become almost constant over the past 2 months since she'd started taking classes at Brookfield University. I know, she said quietly, fumbling with her backpack. "My last lecture ran over. Professor Hendricks wouldn't stop talking about postmodern literary theory." Marcus shook his head, but his expression wasn't unkind. He was one of the few who didn't join in when the others made comments. "Just get changed quick. Friday afternoon rush is about to hit, and we're already understaffed." She nodded and hurried to the back, her shoulders hunched in that unconscious way she'd developed, trying to make herself smaller, less noticeable. In the cramped staff room, she shoved her backpack into the locker and grabbed the green apron with the Ember and Brew logo embroidered across the chest. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tied it behind her back. Through the wall, she could hear voices in the main cafe area. Laughter. The particular kind of laughter that made her stomach clench. Is that Thora's bag? The voice belonged to Chelsea Martin, the shift supervisor who seemed to take personal offense at Thora's very existence. "She's late again? God, how does she expect to keep this job if she can't even show up on time?" Another voice joined in, sharp and cutting, Bree Hutchinson. "Maybe she's too tired from all those late-night study sessions. You know, working so hard to prove she belongs at Brookfield." The sarcasm dripped from every word. Thora closed her eyes and leaned against the locker, willing herself to become invisible, to disappear into the metal surface. She'd chosen Brookfield specifically because it was supposed to be different from her hometown, from the small mining community in Montana, where everyone knew everyone and expectations were set before you could even walk. She'd thought that in a city, at a real university, she could reinvent herself. She'd thought wrong. The reality was simpler and more brutal. She was a 22-year-old woman trying to balance a full course load with a job that barely covered rent, and people like Chelsea and Bree could smell desperation like sharks, smell blood in water. She emerged from the back room with her head down, moving quickly to her station at the register. The cafe was already filling up, the usual Friday crowd streaming in with their laptops and textbooks, claiming the best tables near the windows and the outlets. The air hummed with conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine. "There she is," Chelsea said, loud enough for several customers to hear. "Our perpetually late literature major. Think you can handle the register without screwing up orders today?" Thora felt heat creep up her neck, staining her cheeks red. "Yes," she said quietly. "What was that?" "Speak up. Customers need to actually hear you." "Yes," louder this time, but her voice still sounded thin and uncertain to her own ears. Chelsea rolled her eyes and turned away, making a show of checking the pastry case inventory. Bree snickered from where she was loading the dishwasher, her blonde ponytail swishing as she shook her head in exaggerated disbelief. The afternoon shift dragged on in its usual pattern. Thora took orders, made change, smiled at customers, even as her face ached from holding the expression. Chelsea found reasons to criticize constantly. The way Thora arranged the cups, the speed at which she worked, the tone of her voice. Each comment landed like a small stone, and by the time Thora had been there 2 hours, she felt like she was carrying a backpack full of rocks. Around 5 o'clock, the door opened and a group of students poured in. their voices filling the space with easy confidence. Thora recognized them immediately. They were part of the Brookfield social elite. Not just wealthy, but effortlessly, casually wealthy in that way that came from generations of family money and connections. They wore their privilege like a second skin, comfortable and unquestioned. At the center of the group was Vaughan Ashford, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of symmetrical features that made people turn their heads. He captained the university's crew team and came from a family whose name was carved into buildings across campus. Behind him came his usual entourage: Garrett Chen, whose father owned half the commercial real estate in the city, Madison Pierce, whose mother sat on the board of trustees, and Sloan Whitmore, whose family's pharmaceutical fortune was the stuff of local legend. They came to Ember and Brew almost every day, treating it like an extension of their dorm rooms, spending hours at the best tables while ordering a single coffee. They were loud and entitled, and exactly the kind of people who made Thora feel like she was watching life through a window rather than living it. "Thora!" Vaughan called out as they approached the counter, his voice carrying that particular tone of false friendliness that meant trouble. "Working hard, I see." Or hardly working. He laughed at his own joke, and his friends dutifully joined in. She forced a smile. "What can I get you?" "The usual. Large cappuccino, extra foam, and make it snappy. Some of us have places to be." He leaned against the counter, his eyes sliding over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Must be nice, having a job this cushy. I mean, making coffee? My dog could do that." Garrett laughed. "Come on, man, that's harsh. I'm sure it takes at least some skill." He paused for effect. "Like elementary school level." Thora kept her face neutral as she rang up his order, her fingers moving automatically across the register keys. She'd learned early on that reacting only made it worse. Give them nothing, and eventually they'd get bored. But that strategy had never actually worked. "So, what's your major again?" Madison asked, examining her perfectly manicured nails. "Let me guess, something practical like philosophy, or maybe comparative literature, something that'll really help with that career in food service you're building." "English," Thora said quietly, handing Vaughan his receipt. "English!" Sloan laughed, the sound high and sharp. "Oh my God, that's perfect. You're literally paying $40,000 a year to learn to read. That's adorable." Chelsea appeared at Thora's elbow, all smiles for the group. "Don't mind Thora. She's still learning customer service. Your cappuccino will be right up, Vaughan." She gave him a smile that was borderline flirtatious, and Thora felt a wave of something that might have been anger if she'd let herself feel it fully. The group moved to their usual table by the window, their laughter floating back toward the counter. Thora focused on making Vaughan's cappuccino, her hands steady despite the trembling in her chest. She'd been working at Ember and Brew for 3 months now, and the pattern was always the same. They'd come in, make their comments, treat her like she was part of the furniture, something useful but beneath notice. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that she'd been coming to this cafe long before she worked here. Years before, when she was just a kid visiting the city with her aunt, she'd fallen in love with this place. The warm lighting, the mismatched furniture, the way it felt like a sanctuary from the world outside. She'd promised herself that someday, somehow, she'd be part of it. The shift ended at 8, and Thora untied her apron with relief, her shoulders aching from the tension of holding herself together. Chelsea had barely spoken to her for the last hour except to point out mistakes, real or imagined. Bree had made a show of sighing heavily whenever Thora asked a question. In the staff room, Marcus caught her arm as she grabbed her backpack. "Hey," he said, his voice low, "don't let them get to you. Chelsea's just insecure, and those university kids are they're assholes. You're doing fine." Thora managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Marcus." "You working tomorrow?" "Yeah. Opening shift." He winced. "That's rough." Saturday mornings are crazy. But hey, at least you'll miss Chelsea. She never comes in before noon on weekends. Small mercies. The following Monday morning arrived with the kind of grey sky that promised rain, but never quite delivered. Thora had 3 classes back-to-back, and by the time she made it to Ember and Brew for her afternoon shift, she was already exhausted. Her backpack felt like it weighed 50 pounds, filled with books she hadn't had time to read and assignments she hadn't had time to complete. She pushed through the door and immediately felt the atmosphere shift. Chelsea was at the counter, but she wasn't alone. Standing next to her, clipboard in hand, was a man Thora didn't recognize. He wore a suit, his grey hair neatly trimmed, and he had the air of someone conducting an inspection. "Thora," Chelsea said, her voice saccharine sweet. "Perfect timing. This is Mr. Reeves from corporate. He's doing a review of all our employees' performance." Thora's stomach dropped. "Corporate?" "Yes," Mr. Reeves said, consulting his clipboard. "We conduct regular reviews to ensure all locations are maintaining our standards." Chelsea has been providing feedback on each team member. He looked up, his expression neutral. "I understand you've been having some attendance issues." I've been late a few times," Thora admitted, hating how small her voice sounded. "My classes sometimes run over, but I always stay late to make up the time." He made a note. "And customer service. Any concerns there?" Chelsea jumped in before Thora could respond. "Well, she's still learning. The customers don't really connect with her the way they do with some of our other staff. She's very quiet, almost unfriendly." "That's not—" Thora started, but Chelsea spoke over her. "And there have been some accuracy issues with orders. Not major, but enough that we've had a few complaints." That was a lie. Thora kept meticulous track of her orders, double-checking everything before it went out. But she couldn't prove it, and saying so would just make her look defensive. Mr. Reeves made more notes, his pen scratching across the paper. "I see. Well, Thora, I'll be observing the shift today to get a sense of things myself. Just work as you normally would. The next 4 hours were excruciating. Every move Thora made felt scrutinized, every interaction weighted with potential failure." Chelsea hovered nearby, occasionally interjecting to help in ways that only made things worse. When Thora took an order for a customer, Chelsea would swoop in to confirm the details, as if Thora couldn't be trusted. When she made a drink, Chelsea would watch with narrowed eyes, sometimes suggesting adjustments that weren't necessary. And then Vaughan and his group arrived. They swept in like they owned the place, their voices loud and their movements expansive. Vaughan headed straight for the counter, that familiar smirk already in place. "Thora, my favorite barista. How's the grind today?" "Get it? The grind?" He laughed, and Garrett and Madison joined in dutifully. Thora felt Mr. Reeves's eyes on her from where he stood near the pastry case. "Hi, Vaughan. What can I get you?" "The usual. But let's make it interesting." He turned to his friends. "What do you guys think? Should we trust Thora with our orders, or should we ask for someone more experienced?" "Definitely someone more experienced," Madison said, her voice carrying across the cafe. "No offense, Thora, but you do seem kind of frazzled today." Chelsea materialized beside Thora. "I'd be happy to take over," she said smoothly. "Thora, why don't you go check the inventory in the back?" It was a dismissal, and everyone knew it. Thora felt the humiliation burn through her like acid, but she nodded and stepped away from the register. As she walked toward the back room, she heard Vaughan's voice. "See, even her boss doesn't trust her." More laughter. In the staff room, Thora leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, fighting back tears. She was so tired, tired of being small, tired of being dismissed, tired of pretending that words didn't hurt when they carved into her like knives. The door opened, and Marcus stepped in. "Hey, you okay?" "Fine," she said automatically. "You're not fine. Those guys are complete dicks, and Chelsea's throwing you under the bus." He paused. "Look, I probably shouldn't say this, but I heard Reeves asking Chelsea about letting you go. She's pushing for it hard." Thora's eyes snapped open. "What?" "Yeah, she's been building a case for weeks. The lateness, the supposed customer complaints. None of it's really your fault, but she's spinning it that way." He looked genuinely upset. "I'm sorry, Thora. It's not fair." "No," she said quietly, "it's not." But fairness, she'd learned, was a luxury for people like Vaughan and Chelsea. For the rest of them, there was just survival. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Mr. Reeves left without speaking to her directly again, which somehow felt worse than criticism. Chelsea spent the remaining hours being aggressively pleasant to everyone except Thora, demonstrating for any potential witnesses how difficult Thora was being by comparison. By the time Thora finally left, the sun had set, and the streets were slick with the rain that had finally decided to fall. She walked the 6 blocks to her apartment, a studio in a building that had seen better decades, and climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. Inside, she dropped her backpack and collapsed onto her second-hand couch. Her phone buzzed, a text from her roommate from last year, one of the few people from Brookfield who'd stayed in touch. "Hey, saw you at work today. You okay? Those people at your table were being really loud and obnoxious." Thora typed back, "I'm fine." Just another day. But she wasn't fine. And she was starting to realize that surviving wasn't the same as living. The following Wednesday brought worse news. Thora arrived for her shift to find Chelsea waiting with an envelope. "Mr. Reeves wants to see you," she said, barely containing her satisfaction. "Main office, tomorrow at 9. "What's it about?" "He'll discuss it with you then." Chelsea turned away, dismissing her. Thora worked her shift in a fog of anxiety, her hands shaking whenever she wasn't actively focused on a task. She knew what this meant. She was going to lose this job, and without it, she'd have to drop out of school. There were no other positions available in her schedule, and she couldn't afford tuition without consistent income. Everything she'd worked for, slipping away because Chelsea didn't like her, and Vaughan thought she was beneath him. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, watching headlights from passing cars paint temporary shadows across the walls. Her mind kept circling back to the same question. When had she become this person, this timid, frightened version of herself who let people walk all over her? She thought about her Aunt Dolores, the woman who'd raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was 8. Dolores had been fierce and uncompromising, a woman who'd built a successful contracting business in a male-dominated field through sheer force of will. "Never apologize for taking up space," she told Thora 1,000 times. "The world will try to make you small. Don't let it." But Dolores had died 3 years ago, and Thora had been trying to navigate the world without her guidance ever since. Somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten those words. She'd let herself become small. Thursday morning, she dressed carefully for the meeting. Her one good pair of pants, a clean blouse, her aunt's old blazer that still smelled faintly of her perfume. She arrived at the corporate office 10 minutes early, her stomach a knot of anxiety. Mr. Reeves' assistant showed her to a conference room. "He'll be with you shortly." Thora sat in one of the uncomfortable chairs and waited, her hands folded in her lap. The walls were decorated with framed photos of various Ember and Brew locations, each one looking warm and inviting. Ironic, given how cold she felt in this moment. The door opened, but it wasn't Mr. Reeves who entered. It was a woman in her 50s, professionally dressed with kind eyes and an air of authority that immediately commanded attention. "Thora Wilder?" she asked, extending her hand. "I'm Patricia Brennan. I'm the regional director for Ember and Brew." Thora shook her hand, confused. "I was supposed to meet with Mr. Reeves. Change of plans. I wanted to speak with you personally." Patricia sat down across from her, setting a tablet on the table. "I've been reviewing your file, and I have some concerns about the feedback we've been receiving from your location." Here it comes, Thora thought, the termination speech. "Specifically," Patricia continued, "I'm concerned about the management style at that location. We've had multiple complaints about the work environment, and your situation has highlighted some serious issues." Thora blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Chelsea Martin has been with the company for 2 years, and this is the 3rd employee she's driven out. I should have addressed it sooner, but these situations are complicated." Patricia's expression was serious. "I want you to know that we don't consider you to be the problem here. Your performance metrics, actual metrics, not Chelsea's subjective assessments, are excellent. You're accurate, punctual, despite what's been claimed. And customers have actually provided positive feedback about you specifically." The relief was so intense, it was almost painful. "But Chelsea said a lot of things that don't align with reality. She's also made some serious errors in judgment regarding workplace conduct." Patricia pulled up something on her tablet. "I'm offering you a transfer to our downtown location. With a raise and better hours that won't conflict with your class schedule. The manager there is someone I trust, and I think you'll find it a much better fit." Thora felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes." "And Thora?" Patricia's expression softened slightly. "Don't let people like Chelsea make you question your worth. You're good at this job, and more importantly, you deserve to be treated with respect." The following Monday, Thora started at the downtown Ember and Brew location. The difference was immediately apparent. The manager, Derek, was in his 30s, efficient and fair, and he welcomed her with genuine warmth. The other staff members were friendly, showing her the ropes without condescension. The customers were more diverse, including everyone from business professionals to artists to students from 3 different universities. For the first time in months, Thora felt like she could breathe, but she still had classes at Brookfield, which meant she still saw Vaughn and his group around campus. They'd pass her in the hallways between buildings, their laughter always seeming to follow her like a soundtrack to her humiliation. Word had spread that she'd been fired from Ember and Brew, Chelsea's version of events naturally, and it had become just another reason for people to look down on her. 3 weeks into her new position, Thora was working an evening shift when Derek approached her with an unusual expression on his face. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Sure." He led her to the small office at the back of the cafe. "So, I got an interesting call today from Patricia. She wanted to give you a heads up about something." Thora felt her stomach tighten. "What kind of something?" "The Brookfield location is closing for renovations next month. During that time, they're going to be redirecting their regular customers to this location and a couple others in the area." He paused. "She wanted you to know, in case that might be uncomfortable, given what happened." "I'll be fine," Thora said automatically. "That's not all. Chelsea's being transferred to a different region. This is her last week with the company in this area." He studied her face. "Patricia wanted you to know that she took your experience seriously." The news should have felt like victory, but instead Thora just felt tired. Vindication didn't erase what had happened, didn't undo the months of anxiety and self-doubt. But maybe it was a start. The renovation announcement went up at the Brookfield location on a Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, the downtown Ember and Brew was packed with the displaced crowd, including many faces Thora recognized from campus. She was working the register when they walked in. Vaughn, Garrett, Madison, and Sloan, their expressions registering surprise, and then something close to disdain when they saw her. "Oh, great," Madison said, not even trying to lower her voice. "She's working here now, too. Is there no escape?" Thora took a breath and kept her face neutral. "What can I get you?" Vaughn stepped up to the counter. that familiar smirk in place. Fired from one location and already infecting another. That's dedication to mediocrity, Thora. I respect that. Large cappuccino? Extra foam? She asked, her voice steady. He looked momentarily thrown by her lack of reaction. Yeah, but actually have someone competent make it this time. I'll make it myself, she said. It'll be ready in 5 minutes. She turned away to start his drink, ignoring the comments that followed her. Derek caught her eye from across the cafe and gave her a subtle nod of support. The other barista, a guy named Jamie, stepped up to help without being asked, his presence a silent reminder that she wasn't alone here. The cappuccino she made was perfect. She knew it was, because she'd spent years perfecting her technique, long before she worked at either location. She handed it to Vaughn with a neutral expression. He took a sip, clearly preparing to find fault, but his face registered reluctant surprise. Huh? Not bad? Thanks, she said, and turned to the next customer. This became the new pattern. For the next 3 weeks, Vaughn and his group came in regularly, and each time they made their comments, their little jokes at Thora's expense, but something was different. The staff at this location had her back. Derek would casually materialize whenever the group got too loud, his presence alone enough to moderate their behavior. Jamie and the other baristas engaged with Thora as an equal, their respect visible enough that even Vaughn's group couldn't entirely pretend she was beneath notice. And Thora herself was changing. The confidence she'd lost was slowly rebuilding, brick by brick. She held her head higher, made eye contact, spoke with more certainty. The job that had been a source of shame became something else. Proof that she was working for her education, supporting herself, building something. During the 4th week of the renovation, something unexpected happened. Thora was restocking the pastry case when she heard a familiar voice near the counter. "Excuse me, could I get a word with the manager?" She looked up. It was Chelsea. Derek emerged from the office, his expression politely neutral. "I'm the manager. How can I help you?" Chelsea glanced around the cafe, her eyes skipping over Thora as if she wasn't there. "I'm Chelsea Martin. I was managing the Brookfield location, and I'm looking for employment opportunities in the area. I have 2 years of management experience with Ember and Brew, and I thought—" "I'm familiar with your background," Derek interrupted, his tone still polite but distinctly cooler. "We're fully staffed at the moment. But I appreciate you stopping by." It was a dismissal, clear and professional. Chelsea's face tightened, a flush creeping up her neck. "I see. Well, if anything opens up, we'll keep your information on file." Derek's expression made it clear that no such thing would happen. After Chelsea left, Derek caught Thora's eye and gave her the slightest smile. Sometimes justice was quiet and administrative, but it was justice nonetheless. The Brookfield renovation finished on a Tuesday in late October. Thora had expected the downtown location to return to its normal traffic, but many of the displaced customers had discovered they preferred the new cafe. The atmosphere was better, the staff friendlier, the vibe less exclusive. Vaughn's group, however, returned to their original location immediately. Thora heard through campus gossip that they'd complained about the downtown cafe being too crowded and not the same. She didn't think about them much anymore. She was too busy with her own life. Her classes were going well, she'd made friends with several of the staff at the cafe, and she'd even started dating Jamie, though they were taking it slow. Life had settled into something manageable, something good. And then, on a Friday evening in early November, everything changed. Thora was working a late shift, the cafe mostly empty as closing time approached. She was wiping down tables when the door opened and Patricia Brennan walked in, accompanied by a man in an expensive suit whom Thora didn't recognize. "Thora," Patricia said, smiling, "I'm glad you're here. Do you have a moment?" "Of course," Patricia gestured to the man beside her. This is Robert Chen, the CEO of Ember and Brew. Robert, this is Thora Wilder. Thora shook his hand, bewildered. The CEO? What was happening? It's a pleasure to meet you, Robert said warmly. Patricia has told me a lot about you. Your work ethic, your dedication, your skill with customers, the kind of employee we're always looking to promote within the company. Thank you, Thora managed. Actually, Patricia said, we wanted to discuss an opportunity with you. We're opening a new location near the Brookfield campus next spring, and we're looking for someone to help with the development and possibly take on an assistant manager role. Thora felt the world tilt slightly. I'm sorry, what? You'd be perfect for it, Patricia continued. You know the Brookfield community. You've proven yourself at 2 locations now, and honestly, you have the kind of customer rapport we want to build our expansion around. She paused. It would come with a significant raise and benefits, of course, and it would still work around your class schedule. I'm still in school. I'm just a literature major trying to graduate. Robert smiled. Some of the best managers I've ever worked with came from humanities backgrounds. They understand people, which is what this business is really about. He extended a folder. Think it over. No pressure, but we'd love to have you as part of this project. After they left, Thora stood in the empty cafe holding the folder, her hands trembling slightly. Derek appeared from the office grinning. So? What do you think? You knew about this. Patricia called me last week to get a reference. I told her you were the best hire we'd had in 2 years. He crossed his arms, looking proud. You're going to say yes, right? I don't know. It's a lot. What if I mess it up? Thora, you've been doing this job better than most people who've been here 5 times as long. You've dealt with Chelsea's bullshit, corporate reviews, entitled customers, and you've kept showing up, kept doing excellent work, kept being kind to people, even when they didn't deserve it. He shook his head. If you can't see what everyone else sees, that you're damn good at this, then you need better mirrors. That night, Thora sat in her apartment reading through the proposal. The salary they were offering would cover her tuition and then some. The position would give her real management experience, and the location, right near Brookfield, felt like a kind of full-circle moment. She thought about her Aunt Dolores, about what she would say. Probably something like, "What are you waiting for? An engraved invitation? Take the opportunity and run with it." Thora smiled and texted Patricia, "I'm in." The next few months were a whirlwind. Thora worked with the development team on the new cafe's layout, menu offerings, and staffing plan. She attended training sessions on management, inventory, scheduling, and customer service excellence. Patricia mentored her personally, sharing insights from decades in the business. And through it all, Thora kept going to her classes, kept writing her papers, kept pursuing her degree. Because she'd learned something important. She didn't have to choose between being a literature student and being a cafe professional. She could be both. She could be complex and multifaceted and refuse to be confined to anyone's narrow expectations. The new location opened on a warm day in April, just as spring was fully taking hold. They'd named it Ember and Brew, Brookfield Commons, and it was beautiful, modern but warm, with lots of natural light and comfortable seating and a community board for local events. Thora wore her new assistant manager name tag with pride, greeting customers alongside Derek, who'd transferred to help launch the location. The turnout was excellent, with students from Brookfield and community members all curious about the new cafe. And then, around 3 in the afternoon, a familiar group walked through the door. Vaughan, Garrett, Madison and Sloane stood in the entrance, taking in the space with expressions of pleasant surprise. This was close to campus, convenient, and based on the crowd, clearly popular already. "Nice place," Garrett said to Madison. "Looks way better than the old location." They approached the counter, and Vaughan was in the middle of discussing what to order when he looked up at the person behind the register. His expression froze. "Hi, Vaughan," Thora said pleasantly. "Welcome to Ember and Brew, Brookfield Commons. What can I get you?" His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes flickered to her name tag, where assistant manager was clearly printed beneath her name. You work here?" "I'm one of the opening managers," she corrected gently. "This is actually a new location that I helped develop." Madison's perfectly made-up face registered confusion. "But we heard you got fired." "No, I was promoted to the downtown location and then promoted again to help open this cafe." Thora kept her tone professional, even friendly. "So, what can I get you?" "First-time customers get 10% off." There was a long, awkward silence. Thora could see the gears turning in their heads, trying to reconcile the version of her they'd created, the pathetic girl barely clinging to a low-wage job with the reality standing before them. Sloane recovered first. "Oh, congratulations, I guess. That's great." She sounded like she was choking on the words. Vaughan still looked stunned. "I didn't realize. We thought—" "That I was incompetent?" Thora supplied, her tone still pleasant, but with an edge of something sharper beneath. "Or that I was just a poor college student barely scraping by?" "I didn't mean—" he started. "It's fine," she interrupted. "Really. You made assumptions based on limited information. People do that." She gestured to the menu board. "But I do need to take your order if you're planning to stay." We have a line forming. And there was a line. Several people waiting behind them, some of whom Thora recognized from Brookfield. The group quickly rattled off their orders, paying and moving aside with a haste that bordered on fleeing. As they settled at a table far from the counter, Thora could see them huddled together, talking in low, urgent voices. She imagined they were processing, recalibrating, maybe even feeling embarrassed. She hoped they were embarrassed. Not out of cruelty, but because maybe, just maybe, it would make them think twice before treating someone else the way they'd treated her. Jamie had transferred to the new location too, and during a lull in service, he leaned over and whispered, "That was incredibly satisfying to watch." Was it that obvious? Only to those of us who know the backstory. To them, you were just a professional doing your job, which somehow makes it even better. That became the new normal. Vaughan's group continued coming to the cafe. It was too convenient and too nice to avoid. But their interactions with Thora were starkly different. Polite, respectful, even occasionally friendly in that surface-level way that meant they'd recognized a shift in the social order. Madison actually apologized one day, catching Thora during a quiet moment. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, her voice quiet enough that her friends couldn't hear, "for how we acted before. It was shitty." "Thank you," Thora said simply. "I appreciate that." "Did you really help design this place?" "Helped develop it, yeah. The layout, the menu, some of the aesthetic choices. It was a collaborative process." Madison looked around with what seemed like genuine appreciation. "It's really nice. Better than any of the other cafes near campus." That was the goal. It wasn't friendship. Thora had no illusions about that. But it was something. An acknowledgement. A correction to the narrative. Garrett and Sloane never apologized directly, but their behavior shifted too. They stopped making jokes at Thora's expense, stopped treating her like she was invisible or beneath them. Once, Garrett even complimented the new seasonal menu items. Vaughan was the holdout. He remained polite, but distant, his pride clearly wounded by the revelation of how wrong he'd been. Thora didn't particularly care. His opinion of her had never really mattered. What mattered was her opinion of herself, and that had been rebuilt, reinforced, made stronger through everything she'd endured. The semester ended, and Thora's final grades came back, 3 A's and 1 A-. She'd managed to balance a demanding management position with a full course load, and she'd excelled at both. On a warm evening in mid-May, she was closing up the cafe when Patricia stopped by. "How's it going?" Patricia asked, accepting the coffee Thora offered her. "Really well. Revenue is up 15% from projections. Customer satisfaction scores are excellent, and we've had 3 staff members request transfers to this location, which Derek says is a good sign." "It is. People want to work in places with good leadership," Patricia smiled. "I wanted to let you know that corporate is impressed. Very impressed. There's talk of having you consult on future location openings, maybe even fast-tracking you to full manager status once you graduate." Thora felt a surge of pride. "I'd love that. You've come a long way from that conference room meeting." "I have," Thora agreed. "I almost didn't, though, if you hadn't intervened." "You would have found another way," Patricia said firmly. "People with your combination of resilience and competence always do. I just helped accelerate the timeline." After Patricia left, Thora did a final walk-through of the cafe before locking up. She paused at the front window, looking out at the Brookfield campus in the distance. Somewhere out there, Vaughan and his friends were probably at a party, living their charmed lives. Chelsea was working at some other company, hopefully treating her employees better, but probably not. And Thora. She was standing in a cafe she'd helped build, wearing a management badge she'd earned, planning for a future that looked brighter than she'd dared imagine just a year ago. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jamie. "Dinner tomorrow?" "There's a new Thai place I want to try." She smiled and typed back, "Yes. Pick me up at 7. It's a date." Thora locked the door and headed home through the warm spring evening, feeling the weight of the past year finally lifting from her shoulders. She'd been underestimated, dismissed, mocked, and nearly broken. But she'd survived it all, and more than that, she'd transformed it into something powerful. Because the truth was, people like Vaughan would probably never really understand what they'd put her through. They'd never comprehend the nights she'd cried from exhaustion and humiliation, the times she'd considered giving up, the constant weight of their casual cruelty. But they didn't need to understand. Their understanding wasn't required for her success. What mattered was that Thora understood. She understood that her worth wasn't determined by their opinions. She understood that resilience wasn't about never falling. It was about getting back up again and again until you built something they couldn't tear down. She understood that working a service job didn't make her lesser. It made her capable and dedicated and willing to do what it took to achieve her goals. And she understood finally that the best revenge wasn't confrontation or anger. It was success. It was building a life so full and rich that their mockery became just background noise, barely audible above the sound of her own achievements. A week later, on a busy Saturday afternoon, Thora was reviewing inventory in the back office when Derek knocked on the door frame. "You have a visitor," he said, his expression unreadable. "Who?" "Just come see." She followed him out to the main floor, where a figure stood near the counter. It took her a moment to recognize him. He'd lost weight, his expensive clothes replaced with something more humble, his usual swagger entirely absent. Vaughan. He stood awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable, his hands shoved in his pockets. When he saw her, he straightened slightly. "Thora. Hey, do you have a minute?" She glanced at Derek, who shrugged. "It's your call." They sat at a table in the corner, away from the other customers. Vaughan stared at his hands for a long moment before speaking. "I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. I just didn't know how." He looked up, and she was surprised to see genuine discomfort in his eyes. "I was an asshole to you, not just once, but consistently, for months. And I'm sorry." Thora waited, saying nothing. "I could make excuses," he continued. "I could tell you about the pressure from my family, or how my dad basically dictated my entire life, or how I was projecting my own insecurities onto you. And all of that's true, but it doesn't excuse what I did." He rubbed his face. "I've been in therapy since the semester ended. My parents found out I'd been failing 2 classes, too busy partying and being an entitled prick to actually study. They threatened to cut me off, which terrified me because I realized I had no idea who I was without their money and their name." "I'm sorry you're struggling," Thora said carefully, "but I'm not sure what you want from me." "Nothing. I don't want anything. I just needed you to know that I know what I did was wrong. You didn't deserve any of it." He stood up. "That's all. I'll let you get back to work." He was halfway to the door when Thora spoke. "Vaughn." He turned. "I appreciate the apology, genuinely, and I hope you figure things out." She paused. "But part of figuring things out is understanding that saying sorry doesn't erase what happened. It's a start, but it's only a start." He nodded slowly. "I know. Thanks for hearing me out." After he left, Derek approached. "You okay?" "Yeah." And she was. The apology had been unexpected, but it didn't change anything fundamental. It was nice to receive, but she hadn't needed it to move forward. She'd already done that on her own. The summer passed quickly. Thora took 2 online classes to get ahead on her graduation requirements, while continuing to work full-time at the cafe. She and Jamie's relationship deepened, built on mutual respect and shared values. She made real friends among the staff, people who knew her whole story and valued her for exactly who she was. In August, Patricia called her with another opportunity, a chance to help open a 3rd location, this one in a neighboring city. "You'd be the primary manager this time," Patricia explained. "Full authority, full benefits, and a salary that would let you work part-time instead of full-time once the school year starts." Thora said yes without hesitation. By the time fall semester rolled around, she was managing her own cafe, taking 3 classes, and being courted by graduate programs, impressed by her combination of academic excellence and real-world leadership experience. On a crisp October morning, almost exactly a year after Patricia had first offered her a way out of the Brookfield location, Thora stood in her cafe watching the morning rush. The space was packed with regulars who greeted her by name, staff members who respected her leadership, and new customers drawn by the cafe's growing reputation. Her phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello." "Hi, Thora. This is Chelsea Martin." Thora felt her body tense involuntarily. "Chelsea, hi. I know this is probably weird. I got your number from... Well, it doesn't matter how. I just wanted to call and apologize." Chelsea's voice sounded different, smaller, less certain. "I treated you horribly when you worked for me. I was insecure and threatened by how good you were at the job, and I took it out on you instead of dealing with my own issues." "Okay," Thora said carefully. "I lost my job because of how I managed that location. Actually, I've lost 2 jobs since then because I keep falling into the same patterns." Chelsea laughed bitterly. "My therapist suggested I make amends with people I've hurt. You were at the top of that list." "I appreciate you calling," Thora said. "Genuinely. I hope you're able to work through whatever you need to work through. Are you really managing your own location now?" "I am." "That's amazing. You deserve that opportunity way more than I ever did." Chelsea paused. "Anyway, I won't keep you. I just wanted you to know that I know what I did was wrong, and I'm sorry." After she hung up, Thora stood for a moment, processing. 2 apologies in 3 months from people who'd made her life miserable. She didn't know if they were truly changing or just going through motions, but she hoped for their sake it was the former. Carrying around that kind of cruelty couldn't be easy, even for the people inflicting it. Jamie appeared at her elbow. "Everything okay?" "Yeah." She smiled at him. "Everything's good." And it was. Not perfect. Life never was, but good. She'd built something real from the ashes of her humiliation, something that belonged entirely to her. The cafe door opened, and a group of students walked in, laughing and chatting. One of them, a young woman who looked nervous and uncertain, approached the counter. "Hi," she said quietly. "I'm looking for a job. Are you hiring?" Thora smiled. "We might be. Have you worked in food service before?" "No, but I'm a quick learner. I really need this. I'm trying to pay for school, and my schedule is kind of difficult, but I promise I'll work hard." The girl reminded Thora of herself a year ago, desperate, determined, trying to prove she was worthy of a chance. "Tell you what," Thora said. "Fill out an application, and let's set up an interview for later this week. I'll work with your schedule." The girl's face lit up. "Really? Thank you so much." After she left, Jamie nudged Thora. "You're going to hire her, aren't you?" "Probably. She reminds me of someone I used to know." "You're a softie." "Maybe. Or maybe I just remember what it's like to need someone to believe in you." Thora turned to face him fully. "Besides, everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves. Some of us just need a better environment to do it in." That evening, as Thora locked up the cafe, she paused to look at the space she'd helped create. The warm lighting, the comfortable furniture, the community board filled with local events and job postings and art show announcements. It was everything she'd dreamed of when she was a kid visiting the original Ember and Brew with her aunt. She thought about Vaughan and Chelsea and all the people who'd underestimated her. She wondered if they understood yet that their cruelty hadn't broken her. It had forged her into something stronger. Probably not. People rarely saw the full consequences of their actions, especially when those consequences involved someone else's triumph. But that was okay. Thora didn't need them to understand. She didn't need their validation or their remorse or their belated recognition of her worth. She had her own cafe, her own success, her own life built on her own terms. And really, what better revenge could there be than that?